Robert Drysdale. Welcome to the show, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's an honor, mate. It's an honor to sit down with you. I've been doing martial arts forever, and I hear about some big names in the jiu-jitsu community, and I obviously know you, mate. You are regarded as a, an an individual just with a prolonged career in mixed martial arts, jiu-jitsu. But yeah, mate, it's an honor to sit down with you.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure. I'm always consider myself to be a fortunate man. I've been doing what I love my entire life. So me talking about what I love it's my privilege. It's my honor.
Yeah. You gave a TED talk, Robert. It was called "What is the Point of Winning?" How did that concept evolve over the years, both in martial arts and in your life?
I don't know, man. Like I don't think there's a day where you start asking these questions, but these questions are always on the forefront of my mind, not just the back of my mind, but I would say on the forefront, really. I'm writing a book now. It's called "What is the Purpose of BJJ?" So I
Oh,
asked,
fantastic.
I asked this question a lot, the questions a lot because I think that everything we do, if your purpose is not clear, it's not clear what you're doing and why. Wait, where are you going and why? Right? And I think have a very clear sense of purpose is very important. And I've asked myself this question many times: Why am I destroying my body here? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I feel like the answer is always a little bit different and it changes. I think there's some overlapping motivations, and it's not always clear which motivation is in charge. I think the human brain is outstanding at hiding from its own owner what its true intentions really are. I think I'm a big believer in human self-deception. No one
Yeah.
lies more than yourself. You're your own worst enemy in that regard. And I try to be honest with myself and confront myself about hard truths. Some are harder than others to digest. And I think there's a lot of, overlapping motivations here, but I think there's some answers we can get to and on a broader macro level, like why is it that we're so motivated to do things beyond biology or our personal life? It's like, and I'm hesitant to use the word, but it's spiritually speaking. And I don't like to use that word in a supernatural sense, but more in a sense of, what is it that guides your psyche, your mood, your being? Like what is it that motivates you every day? And I think we're all different, but I think you can find some common threads too. So that's
Yeah, it is. So what would be the definition of true success for you, Robert?
I think achieving your full potential in what it is that you are either pre-wired or what you set yourself to do after, right? Because I think you have a genetic makeup, and I think you have certain tendencies. Some people are born to be warriors. Some people are born to be, be administrators. I think we do have different gifts like that. Speaking broadly, of course, but um, what is that full potential? And achieve that full potential while being ethical. I think that's something that we skip a lot because everyone's so on this bandwagon of being successful at any cost. And I'm like, no, not at any cost. If success is achieved without righteousness, then it's not success. In my books, not saying I'm
Yeah,
not trying to realize I'm not proclaimed to be perfect. I know I'm not far from it, but at least I think I know the difference between right and wrong. So that's
yeah,
so success without doing the right thing is not really success in my books. And I don't have to go too far outside the fight world to see examples of this. People that people worship in the fight world, I consider them failures. I look at them and
yeah,
I would not switch places with you. Like, I don't want to be you. And I look at them and people applaud them. And everyone is like, yeah, I'm looking at them and I'm going, there's nothing about you I admire. And sometimes the people I admire deeply are people that no one knows and they have zero followers. And I look at them and I go, that's someone worthy of emulation. That's someone I would aspire to be like, or I want my children to be. So I think we're living in this strange world where I think like It's strange, but the algorithm seems to elevate the garbage. That's my impression of it. It's like the best gets thrown at the very bottom of everything, and the worst rises to the top. And I've made my peace with that, but it is what it is. I suppose it's always been that way. The internet just exposes something that we were perhaps not willing to admit about ourselves.
Yeah. So how did you get into martial arts, Robert? Did you start at a very young age? What age did you start Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I started jiu-jitsu at 16. I had an experience with taekwondo, hapkido, sorry, when I was 9, 10. Lasted about 2 years, didn't go well. I had one competition, it was an embarrassment, crying. Uh, but I always liked combat, man. When I was a kid, I didn't like cars. Kids in Brazil were obsessed with kites and marbles and like little cars, races. And like, to me, it was like, if it didn't involve a sword, a gun, a superhero cape, or some kind of like, hero versus villain kind of dynamic, like He-Man versus Skeletor, I was simply not interested. It
Yeah.
was, everything was about combat and fighting when I was a kid. And that's the only, I mean, even when I start getting into video games, it's still this day, I don't play video games, right? But what I do, it's always in that general, it's got to be some kind of strategy and conflict involved. And it's what I like. So I think it's always been in my nature, really.
Yes. So what has Jiu-Jitsu taught you, Robert, inside the dojo and outside of the dojo? How has Jiu-Jitsu influenced you into be able to handle life and adversity and setbacks and obstacles?
I think, I mean, I don't think the lessons are only in jujitsu. I suspect if you speak to a carpenter, he might be able to give you 20 things he learns from carpentry, like, I don't know. You have to ask one, but I think you learn these things. Any trade that you spend a lifetime in, if you're paying attention, you'll learn something about yourself. Not just the trade, but really something about yourself and the world. I think jujitsu helped me in ways that it made me aware of aspects of myself that were very strong and some that were very weak. It really is a mirror to reality. It's like you're holding up a mirror against yourself, and you can look at the hard truths, or you can look away and continue to live in your bubble. The mirror is there. I think you just
Yes.
have that power. And I see a lot of people that are very gifted grapplers, but they don't really have that. They don't look at it honestly, I don't think sometimes, because like sometimes I have my strengths, and I've always been aware of my weaknesses too, and more aware of them as I age and I learn more about myself. But I think jujitsu really is like, hey man, this is what's happening here. Like, you lost. Why did you lose? Oh, it's the referee. Really? Is it the referee? Did you really do everything in your power to win before and during? And what are you going to do after, right? More importantly, what are you going to do? It's like, oh, it's the rules. Oh, it's the gi. Oh, it's the slippery mat. It's always like, and I honestly, my strength in jiu-jitsu, I've never been gifted. I'm a mediocre athlete. You put me in the gym, I am on my best day, I'm mediocre. I am not you can watch me. I'm not fast. I'm not explosive. I have awful cardio. I, I train hard. I did everything. My body got destroyed. But the one thing I've always had, and I think more than most, was accountability. I never blame anyone other than myself. I can't, I mean, I'll get mad at referees sometimes. You're human, but it's not something I dwell on. I wouldn't, like, a year later, still, I lost that match because, like, you're angry for 5 minutes, and then, like, you're like, man, I missed that sweep. Man, I didn't get that takedown. Man, I gassed out. Man, like, my grips died. Like, it was always like something, I always internalized my errors. It was very natural, almost to the point of self-inflicted flagellation, mental flagellation, really, to the point of I was terrified of losing because of the self-punishment that I would inflict on myself after a loss. It was brutal. I was brutal with myself. Always been incredibly brutal with,
Yeah.
not like too much, if anything, and that was my power. I think that was really what I was good at. Um, but like, and it taught me that about myself. I have heart. I could say that. Sounds arrogant to speak, but and then I have other qualities. I'm not great at listening. I'm really very, very in my own head all the time. Like, I've never I'm not that disciplined. I'm disciplined in the sense where I show up at the gym 6 days a week, but only if I was going to do what I wanted to do.
Yes.
Like, I think I missed a coach that put the hammer down and said, no, Rob, we're going to work on your judo. And I'm like, no, I want to pull guard. They're like, no, you're going to work on your judo. And I wished I had, and I had that for some moments in my career. But for the most part, I was just like, you know what? I don't want to work judo, so I'm just going to pull guard and I'm going to do what I want to do, which is most fighters,
Yeah.
really. But that's in case of
Yes.
lack of self-discipline. Just going to the
Yeah.
gym, when you enjoy going to the gym, you can't call that discipline anymore than you can call sleeping discipline because you like to sleep. If you're doing what you like, it does not merit the word discipline if it's pleasurable, in my opinion. Like, discipline is necessarily something that sucks. Like, and that otherwise I can't even call it discipline. You know, I've not been disciplined in my career. Like, I could have been a lot more. I was not great about my diet. And I learned these things about myself. I would like to say that I'm like some kind of super fucking John Rambo about that. And I wasn't. I could have been a lot better, but I lacked a lot of things. And you know, I mean, I can keep going, but my flaws here, I can go endlessly. But, and jiu-jitsu taught me that. It taught me how to be a better human. I'm still a work in motion. You're never really done. I'm still learning from jiu-jitsu. Now, as a coach, I get the hardest lessons I've ever learned in my life came after retirement. And
Yeah.
nothing to do with fighting, to have to do with not fighting and having to find like new challenges you didn't even know existed. I'm like, wait, what? When you're a competitor, you're kind of like Peter Pan, you're still in Neverland. And all of a sudden, like, wait, now you're in the real world. Like what most people face at 18, if you're a competitor, you don't face until you retire.
Yeah.
It's really, you know what? A professional athlete is very much like a rock star, I suppose. You get away with your skills, and you
Yes.
get things, and you get respect, and you get all these things because of your skills. But once you're not that guy anymore, now you're just like everyone else. And then it's like, oh shit, I got to actually do all these other things I don't want to do. Like, this sucks, and it's like becoming an adult late in life, so to speak. And that happens with a lot of musicians, I suppose, professional athletes on a much smaller scale, jujitsu, because it's can't compare it to a rock star, I suppose, but I think there's some similarities in the sense where it allows you to be Peter Pan longer than, most people can afford to.
Yes. The way Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is now, Robert, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just amazing on how far Jiu-Jitsu and martial arts has come. But I do feel that Jiu-Jitsu is going a different route, more so for competition. And me personally, mate, I've always been a martial artist that has always been fixated on self-defense. And the worry that I have with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu right now is it's being taught in a lot of schools for competition. I mean, no way in the world would you roll into an Imanari, into a heel hook, or, Berimbolo in a street fight. But what is your current opinion on the way Jiu-Jitsu is, in particular for self-defense?
I think there's two conflicts here. One is between what is the purpose of BJJ? Like, we can go back to that question. I'm trying to answer that question in the book. And I think there's a conflict here between, are we an educational model or are we a model for ticket sales and entertainment? It's not an irrelevant issue. Like, judo is clearly a model for education. Professional
True.
boxing is a model for entertainment, much like pro wrestling. They're all martial arts. Pro wrestling derived from catch wrestling. Much older than BJJ, okay? And it morphed into a professional event, right? And the promoters figured out they do fake matches. Hey, sells even more than real matches. So let's keep them fake, because the important thing is selling tickets. So they made their metrics very clear, and they'd end up being what they became. Professional boxing, perhaps not fake all the time, sometimes fake, but normally real. But it's also a professional event. But how many lives have been changed because of boxing? And then I look at judo and I go, how many lives has judo changed? It's arguably the most practiced martial art in the world. And I'm critical of judo under the sense that you're referring to, in the case of the reality of combat, as I call it, because I think Jigoro made a lot of mistakes there. He's not a fighter. You got to remember that. He's not a fighter.
Yeah.
These people pedestals, but you guys got to remind yourself, he's not a fighter. He's not known for being a coach either. He was a phenomenal politician, like Bruce Lee. Gets the claim for being a great fighter. Did he fight? Who did he coach? I'm sorry, guys, but you got to be real here. And then, so that's one conflict. Like, what are we? Where are we going? What is the purpose of what we're doing? Right. And I keep going back to the theme of reality. Like, is entertainment really real? Like, is that like, I associate the theme of education to me, and I have a hard time articulating this, but it's a very clear link between reality and education to me. I can't really articulate it well. I'm trying to do this in the book and I'm struggling, but in my head, there's something there. And as I see entertainment as the enemy, as the opponent. So to your point, you're referring to as self-defense. We're saying the same thing, okay? But I avoid the term self-defense because it is associated with things that I don't support. And because it's become such a broad category full of crooks and charlatans, I don't use the term self-defense not to be associated with it. Most of what you see in what is called self-defense out there, me and you both wouldn't work in a fight. How do I know this? Because I watch the UFC. It's that simple. It's that simple. Now, you can always argue, oh, but the UFC isn't real. Okay, but it is as real as it gets. There is nothing closer to the reality of combat than the UFC. And I know some Krav Maga guy is going to write me later, or some Shaolin monk. Oh, but I'll eye gouge you and blah, blah, blah. My man, have you trained that eye gouging? No. So you don't know what you're talking about. Because you can't be good at a jab unless you train it repeatedly. So the techniques these guys are talking about have never been tried empirically. They don't have the coordination, the timing, or the skill to do it because they cannot practice them. Now, a jab across and a right hook, right, or left hook, you can practice that. You can be good at it. The timing will be there. The reflex will be there. The conditioning, the coordination, these things can be practiced and improved on, right? Single leg, double leg, rear naked choke. That's reality of combat, right? So when you're talking about the fads that you're talking about in BJJ, I don't think they're going to last because we think of lapel guards as outstanding now, the same way some nerdy kid in the 80s thought nunchucks were the coolest thing in the world. Like breaking wooden boards or spinning kicks. We've seen this before. The flashy uniforms with the spinning kicks, with the nerdy kids taking over, happened to karate. It happened to taekwondo. Like these guys back in the day were knocking each other out in practice, and it deteriorated into a practice of, commercial practice. To every plaza in Southern California has a little karate or BJJ gym. But once that happens, there's a process of deterioration that follows, lack of credibility, because you have to water down the product to achieve a broad market. It is the flaw of democratization. Once you undergo that process, you're going to sacrifice merit for popularity, for entertainment, for money, whatever you want to call it. And I think these guys are literally entertaining themselves with fancy moves, and they're sacrificing the reality of combat. And jiu-jitsu is losing credibility in the process. Remember, these guys were hooligans in Brazil. When they talk about self-defense now, I kind of giggle to myself. I'm like, it wasn't like that. Now, it's fine if you talk about anti-bullying programs today, but we both know that that's not our history. Like, we were the bullies, right? People don't know this, but there was never a moment in jiu-jitsu history where we were the victims. It never happened. We were always the bullies. But that came with, that brought credibility. That I wanted to be good at jiu-jitsu. When I saw Royce Gracie in the UFC, I have no idea what that guy's doing, but that's what I want to do because it was real. And I was fed up with nonsense. Every time I tried a spinning kick in a fight in Brazil, I got my ass beaten. And after a while, I was like, you know what, Van Damme, you're full of it. I don't know it's not working, man. You're full of it. Because I was tired of drinking that Kool-Aid. So when I found jiu-jitsu, I'm like, that shit's real. Man, listen, I was part of the competition movement. I pulled guard. I did De La Hiva guard. I played spider guard. I still teach it. But I know it's not real. I don't pretend to say that this is no. I draw that distinction. I started my own style here in Vegas. I call it Agon Combat Jiu-Jitsu. I basically created a curriculum that is based on statistics of MMA. I cut out all speculation and personal preferences. It is empirical from A to Z. This is what's happening in the fight. These are the numbers. This is the data. The inspiration was that movie Moneyball. I don't know if you've ever seen it. This is what the numbers are saying. This is the curriculum. No speculation, no personal preferences. Numbers, right? Hard facts. And I think that's where, that's the correct direction we should be going with when any approach to martial arts, because speculation is just that. You're going to be right sometimes, you're going to be wrong others. And personal preferences are always biased. I may like something that works for me, but may not work for you. So, okay, what is the average? What are the common submissions in MMA? Well, let's stick to those. It's a process that wrestling has been undergoing for years, that boxing has been undergoing for years. There's no point of inventing new punches in boxing. because they've narrowed it down a half a dozen punches and say, this is what works. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's just practice the stuff that works consistently. Jiu-Jitsu has not gotten to that point yet because the internet has thrown a monkey wrench in teaching. It is virtually impossible to teach under a commercial setting with the internet in the background because my students think that I know less than a million clicks. Like, well, but coach is saying A million clicks are saying B. Clearly, a million people know better than Rob. They forget that the million people are a bunch of white belts, right? And forgive my lack of modesty, but I'm an expert at what I do. So yes, my opinion is worth more than a million clicks, because the clicks are not coming from people that have know-how. But people miss that. So the internet is framing the discussion. So it's a bunch of like white belts framing the discussion, and black belts submitting to that. They subscribe to that school where they go, you know what, the majority is saying something, I got to go along because I run a business here. I can't go against a student. So teaching is hurt.
Yeah.
And under a commercial setting, it's difficult to have an empirical, pragmatic, objective practice because you're up against forces that are much stronger than yourself. So it's a problem. Look, it's not jiu-jitsu is not the first martial art to undergo this problem. Wrestling, the only reason wrestling, and I stand by this, wrestling does not have that problem is because there's no money in wrestling.
Yes.
The second you throw money in wrestling, it's downhill. It's with Taekwondo, same thing that happened to Jiu-Jitsu, same thing that happened to karate. And it's inevitable, and it's sad, but it's, because I love Jiu-Jitsu for what it brought to the table. But I think at some point we have to acknowledge we became what we used to criticize.
Yeah. It's an amazing martial art, Robert. I love all martial arts. I've been fighting for 30 years, but Jiu-Jitsu really was, for me, a massive turning point. You talked with Tim Larkin, and I really like Tim Larkin and what he talks about. There was a viral video. I don't know if it was in Brazil. I can't remember where it was, but there was an altercation that occurred in a petrol station. Two MMA fighters got into a situation.
Was it in Brazil?
This video really, sorry?
Was it in Brazil?
I don't know if it was in Brazil. I can't remember. I don't know exactly, but yeah, I'll find it and I'll send it to you. But there was a video of these two MMA fighters, and the fight escalated inside the petrol station, and then it moved outside. And you really got to see firsthand the difference between how you fight in the cage and how you fight in the street. It's very difficult to watch. The one of the MMA fighters got hit over the head or blindsided by a metal pole, and I don't know if he's still in a coma today. And it just shows the reality of a self-defense situation. It shows the raw detail of what happens in self-defense, in particular, multiple attackers.
Listen, self-defense, it's such, okay, I'm not talking about the commercialized martial art BS self-defense. I'm talking about the practical category, okay? The actual act of defending yourself in the street. It is such a broad category.
Yeah.
You cannot actually, you can't prepare for every possible scenario. Why? There are too many variables. A rule set, when you create a rule set, you limit the variables. You define how many variables there are. It's clear, it's written down, you know what to expect. You can walk in a jiu-jitsu match with your hands down because you know the guy's not going to jab you, right? You can walk in a boxing match with your hands up and your legs straight because no one's going to double leg you, right? So these things are defined. In a street fight, you don't know who you're fighting. You don't know who they are. You don't know their skills. You don't know their speed, their strength, their conditioning. You don't know their background. You don't know how many people you're fighting. You don't know what they have in their pockets. You don't know what they have in their car. You don't know if they're friends across the street and he's got a machine gun. You don't know if the floor is slippery because sometimes you're not paying attention. Who the hell walks around all the time paying attention if there's oil on this spot, so I probably shouldn't step here when I throw a right hand? Well, guess what? In a fight, you slip, you land on your knees, you get soccer kicked. I've been in a street fight, and man, like, it is different because I was fighting two guys at the same time, and I lost my balance taking one of them down, and I got hit the ground, and he didn't hurt me, but they were throwing kicks at me, and I got back up, and man, that could have been a KO right there.
Yeah.
And it's something you can't. I think that this is my take on it. I think that, when you're talking about weapons, the category is even broader. Okay. But just to try to limit the discussion to hand-to-hand combat, for the sake of clarity and argument, without like getting into this even bigger category, right? I still believe that MMA is the closest thing to like intelligent preparation when it comes to hand in hand, because the reflexes will be there. I can think quickly. I could be dazed. I could be rocked. I could be drunk. If you try to mount me, I'll be shrimping. My instincts are to
Yeah.
shrimp. I will have the right instincts no matter what happens. I might lose, but my instincts are always there, and the reflexes are always there. I'm never recruiting memory. I'm a big fan. I'm a big critic of people who recruit memory. They think memory is going to help them in a fight. If I ask you the name of your maternal grandmother, it takes you 4 seconds to remember her name, right? You go like, right, like, or anything about your doctor, like, give me your driver's license number. Go like, got it. Like 3 seconds. Okay, that's memory for you. Now, 3 seconds in a fight? Are you kidding me? 3
Yeah.
seconds in a fight when someone's swinging at you? There's no 3 seconds, bro. Oh, I'm gonna grab you. What was that self-defense move I learned in that course one time on YouTube? He grabs you in the wrist. What do I do again? Boom, you got clocked already. It's all reflex. It's all reflex. It's your body thinking. It's not your mind. Your mind is not going to help you in a fight. It's your body thinking. That's what I call it. Your body.
100%.
And MMA teaches you that. It's going to teach you how to sprawl. It's going to teach you how to get back up properly. It's going to teach you how to put your hands up and move your feet. It's going to teach you how to fire back. Now, you're going to say, does it cover all situations? No. Because again, if a guy hits you in the head from behind because you didn't see he had a friend, you thought it was a one-on-one, right? You don't know what's behind you. So when BJJ got sold to the world as the greatest self-defense system, it's very interesting how they frame the discussion. I'm a BJJ guy. I love what I do, but the truth is the truth. It has no political party. It has no affiliation. Facts are facts. It was framed in a way where there was an assumption of a dual format, right? So you see Rickson Gracie versus Hugo Duarte on the beach. No one interferes. Actually, there was some interference with like people throwing sand in Hugo Duarte's eyes. That's a known story, but for the most part, I remember when I was a kid, there was a code of honor there that if you fought, no one interfered. Sometimes adults would watch. Adults would be like, oh, let them fight. And it was a code of honor there where no one would jump you. Not all cultures subscribe to that. Like some cultures will be like, no, your friends are supposed to help you. They've got 10 versus 1. And those are my friends. They were there at the time. Right. So there's an assumption there of a dual format, and there are no weapons involved. That's a huge assumption, because not like in Brazil during a certain period, that code of honor was there. Like if someone interfered on your behalf, it was almost like, bro, are you serious, man? It's embarrassing. Different cultures, right? It's probably changed now. I haven't been there so long, but in the US, like, like friends will help friends. Like someone falls down, you soccer kick the guy in a bar fight, and you get a chair and a bottle, you break it on his head. And like everywhere's going to have, there are some things like, for example, whenever I gouge a guy in a fight, unless I felt like I was going to kill, I prefer to beat him with a rear naked choke. But some people might go, you know what, man, I'll stab this guy right away for nothing, for no reason. Like you push him, boom, get stabbed. Like you might have different limits as to what is acceptable. I would probably not want to hit a guy in the balls either in a fight. Maybe I'm too fair.
Yeah.
Most people don't think that way, So what are the rules of engagement? We don't agree because there are no rules. So, and my point is, quick thinking is your best friend. That is the only thing that I'm like, I think this is universal. Every self-defense expert will agree with you. Is you got to think quickly. You don't have time to recruit memory. You got to be ready, and you got to think quickly, and hopefully you think the right way.
Yes. My coach, Geordie, he said the exact same thing, Robert. He regards MMA as one of the most useful practices that you can implement for self-defense. And I had the pleasure of chatting with Eli Knight on my podcast, Robert, and I love what Eli does. And I was talking to him just about what's happening over here in Australia, mate. We've had a 30% increase in crime across the country. And a few months ago in Sydney, we had a mass stabbing. 6 people died in a Westfield shopping centre. And it really just, when I watched it, it's terrifying seeing anything like that. But most people have no clue what happens in a self-defense situation like that. It's ugly, it's violent, it's vicious, it's fucking terrifying. And, you can prepare for as much as you can in a situation like that. But you made a very good point that it takes less than 3 seconds to react. What sort of training, what how can you prepare for something like that? What do you teach your students?
I don't think that if you are talking real situation, so say you are trained in MMA, you're a well-rounded fighter, you got good grappling, good striking skills. You're not limiting yourself to that. You might have to pick up on a chair, a fucking bottle, or a fucking pipe, or you have, but I think what you get from MMA and live sparring is the threat of someone in your face, and that'll
Yes.
break you. I get kids that come in the gym, and the parents want them to learn confidence, self-defense. They're getting bullied, whatever. And after a couple of weeks of training, I have them do a sparring on the Agon program I was telling you about. They're striking, right? So you got to take them down. It's like MMA. And the kid doesn't want to spar. The parents are like, oh my God, it's going to get hit. It's going to get hit. And I'm like, so they got 16 ounces, like an 8-year-old with 16-ounce gloves on. That's like, you know how big those gloves are on an 8-year-old? They're like massive.
They're huge.
How
Like
we know enough about fighting, ain't no one going to get hurt with those. Like adults hitting each other with 16, like, yeah, you could probably take most, unless you're like getting clocked by Francis Ngannou or something like that. You could probably handle it, right? It's not the end of the world. Kids, are you kidding me? But the parents don't want to see it. And the kid's terrified. The kid gets touched in the face, accidentally touched in the face. The world's going to end. My God, is he going to die? And I'm like, and you want your child to be ready for a real life situation. If they can't handle the pressure of a controlled environment with soft mats where I'm watching and I'll make sure that no one's getting hurt, seriously injured, where there are 16-ounce gloves on, and you're telling me that if you want your child to be ready for a real life situation, they can't even handle this mild sparring session. You're telling your child that they can't do it. That's what you're doing. Oh, but they're going to cry. Let them.
yes.
Because the real life situation is going to be a lot worse than crying. So you have to get them ready to at least handle the pressure. You have to learn to handle the pressure. That if you know what, someone punches you, chances are you're not going to get knocked out. Most people don't know how to hit. They don't know how to hit that hard anyway. Right? So you can take the punch, put your hands up, get back in the fight. It's not over. But it's blasphemy to say that because people are so terrified of getting hit. It's terrible. Like, well, how can we even talk about self-defense if you're not even willing to get ready in a controlled environment? This is when people want to avoid like a real challenge inside the martial arts gyms. You're not serious about self-defense. What you want is to feel comfortable. You don't want real safety. So, I think that at least having that, the ability to think quickly, to react quickly, to fight back, to have the confidence not to break emotionally, that's already huge in a fight. I think that's super important. Beyond skills is just having that, like, hey, I ain't going to break. Like sometimes you get that from like, for example, you might get that from a veteran. Sometimes has zero training in combat, but he has that confidence. Like, motherfucker, I've seen death. You want to scrap? We'll scrap. I'm ready to die here. You don't intimidate me. I've fought the Taliban. Like, you're not going to intimidate me with your jiu-jitsu. I'm like, respect. I'd still probably whoop your ass in a fight, but I know you're not scared. And that already sets him aside because he's like, this guy seems some shit. He's been through some stuff. Like a punch or two is not going to intimidate him, right? And I think that's where society is a disconnect between the reality of combat and society, or even people that, proclaim to be interested in self-defense, because they're not willing to endure any of that. And that's the only thing that can save you, is having this, it's a little bit of toughness, really. Not the superficial toughness. I'm talking like in your heart, like the real kind of toughness, that in my experience, like even fighters sometimes lack, there's a lot of flexing in the world. It's not enough, not a lot of love of the real stuff.
Yeah, definitely. You tapped out one of the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners of all time, Marcelo Garcia, and it was just amazing to watch. I regard Marcelo Garcia. He's amazing, and I just watched that match, and I was astounded. I was like, holy shit! I just couldn't believe what I just saw. But what was your game plan going into that match? What was that like? What was that whole experience like for you, Robert?
I call myself the original Marcelo Garcia fan. I've been watching Marcelo since he was a purple belt. I remember him in São Paulo. I was a blue belt. And I'm like, oh man, I like to watch that guy. He's really good. So I've been watching him before most people even knew he existed, And I like Marcelo. I've always thought he's got beautiful. You know what it is too, man? He's little. He's little.
Yeah.
And when you're little, the world loves you already. No one likes to see a big meathead like me win because it's like, oh, there's the bully winning again. He's fucking 6'3". What a fucking asshole he must be, you know? And then you see a guy that's like, you know, unassuming. He's not particularly muscular. He's unassuming. He's very docile. He's very meek in his actions. He doesn't look like a fighter. Crazy strong, way stronger than me. I'm just
Yeah,
bigger
I
than him.
have heard that. Yeah.
Like holy shit, like a freak of nature strong. But he's small, but his muscle fiber density must be through the roof. But and then you see that little guy pulling off that shit, and his timing and his movements and his skills, and it's just like it fits that. Look, it's the same martial art, the same craving martial art enthusiasts have for Royce Gracie winning the UFC. Here's the little guy beating the big meatheads. It's how you sell martial arts to a Western audience. It's Bruce Lee
Yeah.
is skinny, and look at what he's doing. You can't sell. You can't. Had they put in like some big buff guy from Carlson Gracie team in the UFC, it wouldn't have done as well. The people need, and Marcelo fits that profile, and he is that good. I'm not disputing that, but he fits the profile what the people perceive to be an ideal martial artist. He is pure technique, which is nonsense. There's no such thing as pure technique. Anyone who says that doesn't. There's no technique outside of athletic ability. They're one and the same thing. It's just an idiotic distinction that is so part of martial arts lore that people never give it thought. If you think about it, you don't distinguish these like that. Good technique is the intelligent use of your athletic ability. That's what good technique is. And Marcelo's also, he's an incredible athlete, and he's very, very, his timing is incredible. But at the same time, like, he is somewhat predictable. You know what's coming. He's got a single leg, arm drag to the single, got a phenomenal back take from just about anywhere. You can't blink. He's mostly a half guard player on bottom. So I knew what he was going to do. I knew that he could take me down, but he couldn't hold me down. I knew that he was going to try to take me down. I was very confident of him pulling guard because A, I'd be up on the score because he was going to be penalized. B, I'm used to training with half guard players all day. Some of my best training partners in Brazil, like were Damian Maia and Lucas Leite, they're great half guard players. So I'm like, wasn't worried about that. My goal with him was to scramble, was to catch him in the scramble, him trying to hold me down, me getting back up, him shooting a single, me passing his guard, him turtling up, me going to the back or catching. I had the Darce in my head because it was something I was hitting a lot in practice. And he, he's got narrow shoulders too. Doesn't have a big back. So if you're dealing with someone that's like, can you hear me there, Sal? Sorry, my window just
yeah, I
closed.
can still hear you.
Sorry, yeah. So someone that's like really big and heavy, your arms may not be long enough for the Darce, but he had a narrow frame. So I think the Darce might be the move to hit him with. And the match went pretty much exactly how I was visualizing it. Now, I remember too, like when I was in the final, I told this story many times before, but it's a true story. I was warming up. I don't remember my buddy Sean Rebo at the time. He was just like one of my students, was my buddy. He was like helping me out, warming me up. He's like, let's go. We're in the final of the Open. And I remember in my mind, like kind of like smiling, kind of like I am now, like, almost like, oh yeah, man, I'm here. I got this. Like I'm like goofing around playing. He's like, dude, focus, man. Focus. You're in the final. You got to focus. Stop laughing. That's not, I was smiling. I was like acting very happy. And I'm normally not like that. I'm normally very nervous and introverted and insecure, really, but this day I felt really good. And in my mind, it's just like, I feel like I already won, man. Like I was like, in my mind, I was preemptively celebrating the win almost. I was like, there's no way this is going to beat me today. And I'm the first one to say it. I think is an overall better grappler than me. I think his accomplishments they speak for themselves. I don't pretend to have won what he has. Granted, I did better in MMA than he did, but in general, I think he's an outstanding grappler. He's one of my favorite grapplers of all time. But I don't think I think that if I fought him 100 times that day, I would have beaten him. With the mindset where I was mentally and physically and everything, it was just I don't think he could have beaten me that day. I don't, some people said it was a minute of luck there. And I'm like, man, I've beaten people before where I go like, man, I kind of got lucky there on that ref call. I kind of got lucky on those 2 points. I wasn't sure it was 2 points. I think the referee made a mistake in my favor. I'm the first one to admit to these things. I don't have an ego like that. But that day, I just think what he was bringing and what I had to offer at that moment, it was just a bad matchup for him stylistically, mentally, physically. I wasn't going to lose to him that day. I was very, very confident I was going to win that Open.
Yeah, it was just amazing to watch, Robert. You know, yourself and Marcelo Garcia, two of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners, martial artists I've ever seen. It was just beautiful to watch. And you strangled him with a dart. Was that correct?
It was a Darce choke. You know what's funny about that choke?
Yeah.
I didn't know it had a name, the US. I thought I had invented it. Um, it was like, I actually learned it from, there was this position that Leo would do. It's called the Bravo choke. I believe Kid
Yeah.
Palico did it. And the Bravo choke was a
Yeah.
choke from the half guard where you feed the lapel to the hand, you pull the arm across, you drop your shoulder, and you choke him out. But you basically have that hand behind the lapel, behind the back of his neck. And I love that choke in the gi. I still do. It's one of my favorite chokes. I do it all the time. But no gi, which is something we trained maybe once a week, not even. I started instinctively reaching. Every time they got an underhook on me, I'd reach with my hand. And I kept putting my hand there looking for a lapel. Instinctively, my hand kept going in. And one day I went, oh. And then it was there. So I call it the Bravo choke, right? Or the no-gi Bravo choke. And then when I started hitting in the U.S., people, oh, that's a Darce. And I'm like, Darce? What's a Darce? And it turns out there's a guy in New York called Joe Darce. Apparently, he's been doing it forever. So he probably did it first. But I think he does it from the front headlock, where I was doing it more from the half guard. And what is called a suicide Darce today, which is the one I hit over Marcel. I was doing those two primarily. And, but yeah, so it's just one of those things where I didn't even know it had it. Now I call it the Darce. I don't call it the Bravo anymore, not to confuse people. I was like, oh, yeah, he did it first. He deserves the credit.
Yeah. Yeah. You wrote a book, Robert, Opening Closed Guard. It's a phenomenal book, mate. It's amazing. You know, you talk about the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you're currently, I think, if I believe, you're still working on the documentary of the roots, the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But what specifically sparked your interest in telling the story?
Um, I have an interest in history and the humanities in general that precedes my introduction or to jujitsu. I wasn't a kid. I've always been attracted to combat, but I really in my head I was going to be an archaeologist. I loved encyclopedias. I loved books of adventures, like anything that had to do with adventures, like exploration, discoveries. I like that stuff. I like to read book on ancient civilizations. I said there's a phase there when I was a kid. I was obsessed with books about aliens building, the involvement of aliens in ancient civilizations. I had that phase. It didn't last long. Now I think it's a bunch of, nonsense. But, when you're 12, that sort of stuff is interesting to you. But I always been interested in history in general. I can read history books all day. I absolutely love the theme. And I never show, I have a major a bachelor's in history, which was just
Yeah.
like a side project. Is something that I did, what they call PE in Brazil, Educação Física. And I just wasn't interested. It's like, man, I know all this stuff from jiu-jitsu already. A lot of it was just like, I live this every day. I don't need to study it. But learning about, everything from, ancient civilizations to medieval history, to the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, to Cold War, World War II. Like, oh man, this is so cool. So I was always geeked out on this stuff. So when, after retirement, I don't know if out of boredom or just looking for a new challenge. A student of mine asked me why I had no pictures of Helio and Carlos in my gym. And I said, man, I know absolutely nothing about jiu-jitsu history, which was true. I knew nothing about it. I had never read anything about it. I just knew the common lore, which was just the repetition of the same thing. And Maeda taught Carlos, his favorite student. Helio learned by watching. He revolutionized the art. It's like, I know enough about history to know that things aren't that simple. But I didn't know anything beyond that. And well, you know what? I'm not going to have an opinion on it because I don't. So I was a little skeptic. And so my student goes, "So aren't you a history major?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I should probably know more about jiu-jitsu history." So I remember reading this book at a friend's house called Shocky, The Untold History of Jiu-Jitsu in Brazil on Amazon. And I'm like, oh, well, it seems like a good place to start. And I'm reading this and I'm like, holy cow, this is completely different from what I thought jiu-jitsu. I mean, this is completely at odds. It's like, I mean, some of the same characters, but like it's a very different story. And this is, you can tell that is written by a scholar. This is not written by a YouTuber using ChatGPT. This is someone that knew how to write and he knew how to, do research and he was putting the facts together in a way to like this guy's concerned with the truth. He's not really playing politics here. He's very objective, very pragmatic. For some people, a boring read for these reasons, right? And I had the idea after reading more and more on, on the topic. I had the dissertation of Joseto Ficairo's, Marcial Serrano's books, like some other book things that I had read. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put a documentary together because these guys already wrote it. There's no point in writing it again. Documentary was a disaster. It still is. I'm in my third production. I am never doing this again. I've been fucked over so many times on this, man. I need a book I need a second book on the what I've been through in the past 5-6 years, man. It's unbelievable.
That's a shame, Robert.
It's out of my own money at this point. I'm not rich.
Yeah.
I am not. I did not make millions like these guys have. I live on what my gym makes, which is enough for me to live comfortably. But if I have something left over, I put it into production. And so it's still ongoing, but it's an uphill battle. And
I really hope you do produce the documentary, Robert. I really hope we get to see it eventually.
It's been a war, man, and I'm never touching that again. I'm not. Look at the thing. If you take your car to a mechanic and you know nothing about cars, most mechanics can tell you don't know anything about cars within 5 seconds. And then I can tell someone knows anything about fighting within 5 seconds. That's my trade. I can talk to someone for 5 seconds just based on the questions they ask. I go, this guy knows something about fighting, or he knows absolutely nothing about fighting. People that work in documentaries, editors, cameramen, like they're the same way. They can talk to you 5 seconds and they go, wait a minute, how much money did you raise? Oh, this idiot has so much money and he's famous and he's got all these things. They think that I'm not, but like, that's what they're thinking, right? Oh, this is my cow. And they look at me like I'm some fucking moron, which I am, of course, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just an enthusiast. I just want to make things happen. I know nothing about film. I don't know how much editing costs. I don't know how much any of these things. So I'll you to check. Oh, here's a check. So I ran out of money very quickly, between attorney fees and all that. So it's out of my own pocket at this point, and it hurts me. It hurts me financially. Yeah. It hurts me every month, So I'm getting my ass kicked, and there's a part of me that regrets it all. But I had the suggestion. Look, this is the positive. That was the negative, right? Me being an idiot, an overconfident idiot, But the positive was, Roberto Pedreira, who wrote Shockey, made a suggestion. Like, why don't you write an article about your experience about making a documentary? And I'm like, okay. Seems like this is during COVID, right? Like, we're in lockdown. I'm bored out of my mind. I'm like, I can do that.
Yeah.
So I start, typing. I'm like 2,000 words. And I'm like, well, if I say this, I got to say that. Well, if I talk about this and that, I also have to talk about these other things, right? And but if I talk about this and that, then I should also, next thing you know, bro, I'm at like 40,000 words. And I'm like, I mean, close to finishing saying what I want to say. And I go, man, this is a book. I always wanted to write a book. This is pretty cool, man. This might be a book. Oh, and I can add the interviews. So now I could put the interviews and add context at the end. So that was really where it came from. It came during COVID. And it was written fairly quickly, man. I wrote the whole thing in like 3 weeks because it was
wow.
I was typing 8-9 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's nothing else to do. So and it was all fresh in my mind. And the thing about the world stopped. I don't know if you remember, like, people weren't leaving their homes. The world stopped. No one was like the internet stopped. I felt like no one was calling me. No one was messaging me. I wasn't giving interviews like this. It's like, okay, we're going to die here or something. That was kind of like the feeling some people had. It's like the end of the world. And I'm like, it was kind of nice for me. I learned how to play the guitar. I got to read a bunch of books. Like, I got to write that first book. Like, oh, this is actually really nice. Like, I like lockdown. And then I started typing, and it turned into a book. Editing took longer. I had a great editor for that book. He was phenomenal. But yeah, it came out like I'm proud of it, man, because it reads like a travel journey or a traveling journal. Sorry, and it turned out to be a fun read in a way where I think that some of the other books, even though they're more informative, they're proper history books. Mine doesn't quite read like a history book, but it'll teach you something, and I think it make it more enjoyable because it felt like there was a story behind it, and it was my story of, learning something about along the way, which is pretty much what it was. It was a process of discovery. And I discovered my passion for writing. I always had in the back of my mind I was going to write something one day, but I discovered I like writing a lot more than I ever thought I would. And so I wrote another one, which is a sequel to the first one.
I have seen that. Yeah.
And then I'm working on another one now called What is the Purpose of BJJ? I got some other projects too that I'm like dabbling in, but this is something I'll probably do for the rest of my life. You know, in my free time, I sit down and I write, and I really, really enjoy it. That was a positive. You know, it was like I discovered a new passion in life and something I can do into
Yeah.
retirement. I made amazing friends along the way. I don't know how many enemies I made. I'm sure I made a few. I know the doors stopped opening. That's for sure. I have a lot less doors opening now than I did 10 years ago. It has to do with getting older too, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know how many enemies
Yeah.
I've made, but I made a lot of friends. I made some incredible friends, like people that I would have never met had it not been people that wrote me. They have the exact same interests as me. They read the same books. People that became some of my best friends, and I only met them. I only know them online. I never met him in
It's
person,
amazing.
and we talked. We talk every day. I have like this. I have a guy in Brazil. I talked. I got one in Japan. I got one in San Francisco. I got like people from all over the world, and I talk to these guys almost every day, and I never met them in person. They're like my best
Yeah.
friends now, you know. So I met them because of the books, and I was like, oh man, that was the treasure, you know. So regardless of what happens to the documentary, I can't regret anything because good and bad, it's been an amazing journey. And if that's life, man, that's why it's worth living.
Yeah. What I really loved and appreciated about your book, Robert, is it brought attention to the forgotten heroes, the unsung heroes of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and the evolution of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And what was interesting is, you know, reading through the book, and you conducted numerous interviews, but in your sort of whole perspective, what are some of the common misconceptions that people have in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Because we know obviously the Gracies had a bit of an influence, but there are forgotten heroes, mate. There are a lot of people that, you know, gave way to this martial art which we use in everyday life.
I would. Here's the thing, man. The if you really want to get into the unsung heroes, read Roberto Pedreiro's books, because it's what's interesting that he does is that he analyzes based on what the facts available are. It's like there's always the example that people joke about the Martian historian that comes to Earth and he's given a history to write. He's a very competent historian, but he's from Mars. He has no idea about what the lore is, what the narrative is, what the preconceived notions are. He's just like, no, what are the facts? And he's going to read the facts and he's going to write a book based on the facts, right? That's the ideal historian. He's free of politics. He is free of pseudo-nationalism. He is free of political agendas. He is truly impartial, objective, pragmatic in the story, right? This guy is the closest thing to have it. He's like, so you hear about all these guys, that phenomenal fighters, these guys were fighting every weekend. Did you know that during the Great Depression in the United States, there were arenas watching grappling matches, submission grappling, like judo and jiu-jitsu,
Really?
catch wrestling, with over 10,000 people in an arena?
Really?
Did you?
I
No,
didn't
no,
know
no, no,
that.
no. This is
Wow.
historical fact. This is not conspiracy. This is like, you can look it up. The sources are there. It's forgotten history. An arena, and this is not sometimes, this is happening repeatedly throughout the Great Depression. 10,000 people, 10,000 seats sold watching judo versus catch wrestling in a submission wrestling match. Okay. Purses in today's money of $47,000. That's proportionate to today. Okay.
Yeah.
So what my point is, we're just watching something that has happened before. And they had all the heroes. They had the guys with it evolved into pro wrestling, right? That is the movement that preceded pro wrestling, because at some point entertainment became the metric of success rather than reality and entertainment. This is the marriage that I try to make. It's really in opposition to the idea that entertainment has anything to do with success. It doesn't, in my view, right? But so that's, I mean, and there's a lot of heroes in this story. People that fought a lot, they were incredible, but they were not good at marketing. Case in point, Carlson Gracie. I mean, you don't have to leave the Gracie family if you want to talk about it. Like what the guy did, I argue in my second book, he's what we call Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was born inside his gym. It was not born inside Helio's gym. And I'll argue this with him, because I think the more you understand the story, the more you realize that Orion told a story to the world that was convenient to him. And it wasn't necessarily a lie, but it was very incomplete. And it left a lot of people out, including his cousin, who is really the guy who gave shape to what we now practice. Remember, the Gracie Academy under Helio taught self-defense lessons, private
Yeah.
lessons to rich people. They didn't have group classes with people rolling around on the mats. That was something that did not exist in the Gracie Academy. And there's a very important piece of history there that people ignore. Carlson was the one that said, I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what your class is. The self-defense thing, the stuff wouldn't even work in a fight. I fought MMA, I know. Let's just lower the membership, group classes, go to war every day, and let's go to Acai after practice. Let's go to Acai together. And that's the world we live in. It was created largely, not only him, but he's the main figure. And he's completely forgotten. So yeah, so part of I guess because I've always had a soft place in my heart for the underdog, I dislike the blown out of proportion heroes. I much prefer the heroes that aren't sung. Like, hold up here, man. Like what? Because here's the thing, when you look up to someone, right, you're gonna put someone on a pedestal. You're gonna worship someone. Like this guy's the man. Like you're gonna put him on a billboard for children to look at. I think that you have to first ask the question: what is it that they did? How do they achieve it? Right? Because it's important. It's important for yourself. It's important for your children. It's important for the future of society. Who is it that we look up to? Right. So I've been to Machkahala in Dagestan a few times, and I'm always struck by the fact that when you drive around Machkahala, there's a billboard, or billboards of men who won an Olympic gold medal in wrestling in the 70s. And there's a brand new billboard up with their face on there. And I'm like, my society has a billboard of Kim Kardashian and Kanye West and Justin Bieber and some other douchebag that I can't name because I can't keep up with these clowns. And like these people worship real heroes. This guy's an Olympic gold medalist, and they put a billboard up, and he won it like 40 years ago, 50 years ago. I still remember because they're sending children a message. They're going, this is what good is. Look at what he has to do to be where he is. Pay the price, merit, right? Earn. Like, bravo. To me, it's like, when I saw that, I'm like, I want to raise my kids here. And I'm not even Muslim.
Yeah.
But I'm like, man, this is in a sense, it is a superior civilization because they're teaching better things to their children. Whereas, in my world, like we worship people for wrong reasons. Like when I see Carlson, I'm like, hold up here, man, this guy fought the toughest guys. Like he fought Ivan Gomez, man. Like people don't know it was Ivan Gomez. Ivan Gomez was a Francis Ngannou of his time. Okay. Ivan Gomez was John Jones of his time. Euclides Pereira, Ivan Gomez. They're the best MMA fighters in the world in the pre-Royce era. Carlson fights Ivan Gomez. He's like, 20, 30 pounds lighter. Fights him to a draw, not a scratch on his face. It's incredible. Not choosing opponents, fighting the best guys in the world that he could find. Then he trains the best generation. He practically creates jiu-jitsu as we know it today. For 3 decades, his team absolutely dominates jiu-jitsu tournaments, right? It doesn't die out until like the hoist boom and it became like when the affiliate system blew up. But when it was gym versus gym, he would dominate. And it's a humble guy. Died broke, didn't care about money, let everyone train for free. He's absolutely in love with the art. And I look at those qualities, courage, the integrity, the commitment, the lack of self-interest, like the giving, how giving he was. And I go, this is someone worthy of emulation, in my view. And then I'm not going to mention names here, but think of some of the people that we look up to in grappling today. I'm like, but he's good. I'm like, okay, but look at how, when I look at Jake Paul and I'm like, I don't admire that. Oh, he's become a good boxer. Okay. But like, he's fighting a 60-year-old man and everyone's applauding it. I'm like, the person that sees a problem with this, like, who are these guys? Like, why are we applauding these people? Like, why, how many other boxers out there deserve a chance to make 1 million instead of 50? They dedicated their lives, like people that are actually really good and paid their dues. And we're promoting YouTubers, or we're promoting the other guy who just talks and he's just good at talking. And because he sells tickets, everyone's, and the kids are watching,
Yeah.
So I think it's important that the unsung heroes are brought to light for the right reasons. It's like, why
100%.
are they important? Because they did things the right way. And I think this is the issue, is that we have put the spotlight on people that aren't worthy of emulation. And I think deep down we all agree to it. But people still get excited about watching Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Like, I refuse to watch it out of principle. I understand why Mike Tyson is doing it, and there's a logic there, but I refuse to, support a 25-year-old beating up on a 60-year-old man. I'm like, you guys mentally ill or something? Like, on what planet is that okay? What planet? In the name of entertainment? How much entertainment I have on my phone alone? Like, if I go on, there's so many ways I can entertain myself in this world. You really need to see a 60-year-old man, a hero, like get beaten down by a 25-year-old YouTuber. Like, and no one sees a problem with these things. So like, I don't know. So to me, doing my part in digging these unsung heroes, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm maybe trying to shed some light on people out there that are worthy of emulation. And like Carlson was one of them. There are others. There are many others, but
Yeah.
there's just too many buried histories out there, man. And everyone's like, oh, why don't you write about this guy, Rob? And why don't you write about that guy? I'm like, I wish I had time, man. Like I'm one person. I'm a one-man army. But I think if the
Yeah.
just community just simply becomes aware that just because you see someone all the time doesn't mean they're the most accomplished or the kind of person you would want, that deserves emulation. That there are better people out there, better references for us to uphold as coaches, as fighters, better people. And I don't know, this
Yeah.
stuff matters, man. I think if you're talking about the future of jiu-jitsu or just like the future of
I
humanity, I
100,
think we have to look up to the right people.
yeah. I 100% agree with you, Robert. I think just with the way the world is going now, we put people on a pedestal, and I think that we need to remember the roots, the origins and the history, because I think I find it absolutely fascinating and interesting. But I also believe that people do want to know the truth. They want to know the origins of how Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is today. And I'd be fascinated to hear more and more about, the documentary that you might still be in the works with. And I really hope that, you do at some stage. I hope that, the world gets to see the origins and the history, because we can't forget the heroes, that have contributed to martial arts. But can you think of some names that have been very influential in the history of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
I'll give you one off the top of my head because this comes up a lot. I should add him right here. See if I come up. I'll read you the names of the people that he has influenced, because I was just having this conversation with someone the other day and the list came up. So there's this guy in Brazil called Orlando Saraiva. He's a Carlson Gracie black belt, also under Paquetá and Carlson Gracie, right? He was originally a Paquetá student. And he went to Sao Paulo to teach jiu-jitsu in the late 70s because jiu-jitsu in Sao Paulo was dead. A lot of people don't know this, right? It wasn't like, oh, it's super popular. No, it's like, so he ran a state championship in Sao Paulo in 1976, I want to say, and he had 34 competitors. State championship, 34 competitors. The guy organized, referee, coached, and fought in the same tournament. But obviously, there's no money. That's a shit ton of work. There's no money. And he did that over the years, over the decades. So the leagues he started a competition league in Sao Paulo that still exists, but he was the lead figure in giving that league momentum and doing these tournaments over and over and over until they finally started catching up momentum. When Royce Gracie won, there was a structure there that allowed these guys a place to grow. Are you ready for the list? I'll read. This is not the whole list. This is just off the top
No.
of my head, okay? All
Yep.
right. Andre Galvão, in alphabetical order. Andre Galvão, Bruno Frazato, Damian Maia, Gilbert Durinho Burns, Givanildo Santana, Gustavo Falciaroli, Leandro Lowe, Luis Teodoro Big Mac, Marcelo Garcia, Marcos Buchecha, Michele Nicolini, Mendes and Miao Brothers, Paulo Strecker, Reinaldo Ribeiro, Thiago Stefanucci, myself. These people came out of the same leagues that this guy started. So when people that showed up to jiu-jitsu last week say that jiu-jitsu is big today thanks to them, that kind of like, it bothers me a little bit. I'm like, that's not really true because there's tons of money to be made now. There's tons of rewards. You walked in this last week and I appreciate you making an effort like millions of people have before you, but you are a fragment of this story. Now, this guy, what he did is considerable heavy lifting at a time where there's no rewards. So you can't question his motives because there's nothing to be gained. No one knew what the hell jiu-jitsu was. There's absolutely nothing to be gained. Where is it coming from? Where is it coming from? From the heart, from passion, from true love, from true commitment, dedication. It is pure. You see the difference? Now there's a big check to be made everywhere. Who is pure when there's a big check to be made at every corner? You do this much jiu-jitsu, you get a big fat check. Is it pure? Is it the right person? Is it really the same level of it? Is it the same level of accomplishment when you do something where there's absolutely nothing to be gained and you do it for decades straight, even though no one believes in you? Or when you do it now, when you just this much of an effort and you get 10,000 people in the house? Is it the same thing? Like who are the true heroes of jiu-jitsu here? The people that were there, like showed up last week standing on the shoulders of giants, or the people that did the actual heavy lifting for for jiu-jitsu to be where it's at today, right? There's no. It's like when people talk about a Tesla. Oh, I love the Tesla. Like, I like it too. Oh, Elon Musk. I'm like, pause. Elon Musk is not an engineer, and when he tells people not to go to college, he's full of shit. You know why? Because every single engineer at Tesla has a PhD, so he's full of shit. Don't give me that crap. Oh, he did no. He put it together. He's got his merits. But there's an engineer there with a PhD that was the guy who created that battery. That wasn't him. I guarantee you. It's the same thing with the iPhone. Steve Jobs did it all. No, he didn't. There was some smart guy there that was a computer nerd that no one remembers that did the heavy lifting, and Steve might have paid him well, and I'm sure Steve is part of the vision, and he gave great ideas, and he's a great businessman. I'm not disputing that. Hold up here. There's some people that did the actual heavy lifting here. You want to talk about what civil rights movement in the U.S., Martin Luther King? I guarantee you didn't do it all. There's like 50 people underneath them doing more work than him, if anything, and no one's going to remember their names. And the reason why I insist on this, and it has nothing to do with vanity. I know it's the first thing that would come to mind. It's like, oh, like why? Oh, worship or popular, like a cult of personality. No, it's like, what are the values that create one kind of individual, and what are the values that create the other kind of individual? Which one of these values is the superior one that you would want children to learn, that you would want you to uphold yourself? And I think there's a difference. And when you look at the right values, you end up with the engineer that no one knows. And when you end up with the wrong values, you end up with the Elon Musks. And I'm like, that's the difference. You know, it's that old, does the end justify the means? Because that's such a great question, because you can justify anything if you think that way. I mean, the Nazis were putting Jewish people in gas chambers because it's like, this we're going to save Europe here. You know, we're really going to do it good. We're saving Western civilization. Really? Like, that's how we're saving Western civilization. You can justify it. And there's no crime. There's no atrocious act that you can't justify with that sort of mentality. So I can't, to me, it's like, it doesn't work that way, man. You do the right thing and you uphold the right values at all times, and the consequences are something that come after, you know?
Yeah.
But I think there's so much of that missing in history in general, in martial arts. This is my area, you know. But sorry for the rant, but that's my motivation. If you want to ask my motivation, why I do what I do, and this is why.
No, we can't forget the heroes, Robert. We can't forget the people that contributed to martial arts. You know, obviously Bruce Lee. I'm a huge fan of Bruce Lee and what he did. And
He did something.
Gracie.
I just want to apologize. I don't mean to offend fans. I'm like, hold up here. He was crucial for the spread of martial arts around the world. I just don't hold him on par with people that have fought professionally. It's like there's different kinds of roles.
Yes.
He's had one fight, amateur, but you know, I'm not saying he's not important. For the life of me, I was a fan my whole life too.
Yeah, 100%, Robert, 100%. Yeah. I really hope, Robert, that the documentary does come to light. I know you said that, you know, you're just going to put that aside. But, you know, at some stage, mate, I really do hope people get to see the history and, you know, the work that you've done in promoting the origins of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think, you know, there'd be many people around the world that would really appreciate that. But Robert, mate, I can't thank you enough, mate, for taking the time out of your day. And I really appreciate you sitting down and having a chat, mate. But where can people find you, Robert?
I'm in Las Vegas. I teach classes daily, morning and evening. My gym is called Zenith by Robert Drysdale, Zenith Jiu-Jitsu by Robert Drysdale. You know, I have Aussies coming over all the time. I'm in Australia every year, almost every year. I'm only active as far as social media goes on Instagram, and even so, less and less is like, it's like, oh man, this is so timeless. It's just, but I'm on
It
my Instagram
is,
daily.
yeah.
Um, Robert Drysdale JJ. So Robert Drysdale JJ is my Instagram handle. Don't write me on Facebook or anywhere else. I don't check that at all. And yeah, like if you ever in Vegas, anyone's ever in Vegas, they're welcome to the gym. I'd love to. I love visitors. It always puts a smile on my face to make a new friend. And I always say this when I tend to be very opinionated. Um, it's never come from a bad place. I apologize if I offended someone. My best friends don't agree with a word of what I say. I've learned to coexist with people who are different from me and think differently. And I think that's a good thing. It doesn't mean, that because we may think differently that, we can't be good friends or we can't be respectful and whatever. So like, I said sometimes I offend people's views on things because I tend to speak very bluntly. But it's not coming from a bad place. It's just, it's how I, express myself.
No, and I think 100%. I love everything you have to say, Robert. And yeah, mate, it's been an absolute honour to sit down with a legend like you, mate. But thank you so much, Robert, for your time, mate. And yeah, so yeah, Las Vegas, you're on Instagram. And have you got any upcoming seminars or what's happening with you, mate?
I'm going to Chicago today, actually, in a few hours. I'm flying to Chicago and then Michigan. So I'll be gone this weekend.
Yeah,
Anything else? I'm trying to go to Brazil this year. I haven't been to Brazil in 3 years. I'm due a trip. I don't know if it's going to work or not.
yeah,
I will be in Australia again next year. I don't know when. Not planned yet. I will
yeah.
be in New
Whereabouts in
York,
Australia have you been, Robert?
Tasmania, Sydney, Brisbane, Townsville, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide.
Yeah,
Been everywhere. I mean, the
all over.
major, the main towns. I normally travel there every year. Um, I love it out there, man. I had a good job offer to move there a few years ago. I was in my career. I was in the middle of my career. That's why I didn't take it. But I actually love the country. I would absolutely love Australia. Everything about it. It's it has some of the best things about the U.S. and not some of the things that I don't like. It's a very lovable country. You guys got it good down there. I know
Yeah,
you guys complain too. Complaint is in human nature, but things down under are pretty awesome in my opinion.
yeah. What do you love about Australians, mate?
I think I mean, it's a beautiful country. It's got tons of beautiful nature, and I think that people are on average more educated than Americans. That's one reason I like Europe. I love Scandinavia. I love Scandinavian
Yeah,
countries. I go to Norway and Sweden. Oh my God, everyone speaks 5 languages. So I feel dumb around these people.
yeah.
Like
It's amazing.
I think it's incredible, and just being more educated in general. I think you guys have in general better government than we do. Better government, things function better there. I
Yeah,
just feel like we just have a lot of money. US is a country that we print money. So it's like you have limitless. We'll just make money out of thin air if we have to. Most of the world can't. Doesn't work that way for them, right? So I think maybe people manage things better, just in general, better management, better values, I suppose, too. I mean, I might be romanticizing too. I tend to do that when I travel, but yeah, man, I like it, man. You go public transport, it works. I'm walking around. Oh, this is not too bad, like, the food is good. The weather's nice. The people are friendly, it's a good country.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I hope you come back to Australia soon, Robert. I've always been interested to jump in and do a seminar with you, mate. I've done some amazing seminars with jiu-jitsu practitioners, but I hold you, mate, in regard as the pinnacle of Brazilian jiu-jitsu, mate. And I really hope that if you're ever in Brisbane, oh, mate, I'll definitely be there to do a seminar.
Man, normally promote something on my Instagram. I am awful at marketing. I am. You don't know anyone that's worse than me. You really don't. Like I am. I have to work hard to become a white belt. Put it like that. But I don't promote stuff. But I normally repost stuff on Instagram. So if you could probably catch up then. If I remember to, I'll shoot you a message. But I will be there next year at some point, probably around. I want to guess August, September, October, somewhere around then. And I'll be in Europe too in June or July next year for about a week or two. So Europe as well.
Amazing.
But, I've been traveling.
Amazing, Robert.
Yeah. Thank you so much, man. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time too. And it's been a bit of a fun chat.
Nah, fantastic, Robert. Thank you so much, mate. And I'll chat to you soon.
Thank you, Matt. Have a good one.
See you, mate.